Have you ever wanted to learn how to service your Avet LX yourself? Well, let's go. What is up, guys and gals? Today we're going to show you how to break down, service, and reassemble your Avet 6-to-1 conventional reel with some tips and tricks along the way. Before we get started, we're going to go ahead and pull up a schematic for this so we see an exploded diagram of all the parts, plus have part numbers if we need to order anything. We're going to do this reel in approximately 3 phases. We'll do this left side, that spool, and then the right side. I'm going to start on the left side, but to get there I have to open up these 3 screws right here. Then we'll pull that off and get into it. Now before we open this right side plate up, we're going to undo that right there. Just back up that tension knob, pull that off. We can rock that to pull it up, and then we can just pull this off like so. I'm going to pull that spool out, and if you notice, this reel has already been cleaned. The reason is I had a couple of things on here to change out, and I didn't do a video on it, so just ended up cleaning it while I was there. Now I'm going to pop this off just so it's out of the way. I will go ahead and remove this little piece right here. Now let's go ahead and pop off these studs for the reel seat. This is a size 3/16 of an inch. So it's a little small wrench that you need for it. You can also use something probably close to a 5mm. That should also work. But the exact size is 3/16. All right, now the hex on this to remove these screws here is 7/64. Now what we're going to show you on this side is how to break down and reassemble that clicker. First thing I'm going to do is remove those 2 springs that you see there. I'm going to take my screwdriver, or sorry, my pick, stick it in and up, and I'll pop it off. Next, I'll take a small screwdriver to remove that E-clip right there. I'm going to stick it in one of those gaps and twist to pull it off. And let's push this through so you can see what it looks like so. We'll take this off. We'll see that there's a washer under there that goes in between that and this. And now we can push this out as well if you wanted to, like so. Now you could take these springs off. I'm going to leave them on there. Just make sure when you put these back in, you have this sitting with that little notched end facing up. Now let's go ahead and prep this area. We're going to add some grease in a couple places. Some inside right there. Make sure you get inside the channels as well. You don't want too much, but you do want some there. Around here where the clicker goes. And we can add some grease inside these holes. That's where all these screws will be going. Then some right here where the reel seat will be going. For these holes, you'll see me add oil, just a light amount. And yes, as we work with this reel, some of it might come out. The point is to get some in there. Not all of it will come out. The final thing we'll do here is add a little bit of grease to the top and bottom of that click tongue. And now what we're going to do is take this, stick this back in. It goes in either way as long as you get it in there. Just push it up and in like so. Take that click button. If you notice right here, there's 2 little channels or 2 little indentations on here. We'll start on the one at the top backwards, but we're going to move forward to give ourselves a little more room to put this click tongue on there. Now one thing I do want to show you, if you were ever to remove these springs, or if they came out, the springs will go in from the top down. That helps create the clearance needed when it's going against the spool. So now what you'll see me do is take this washer, stick that on like so, and drop that click tongue over looking like that. Now before we attach these springs, we're going to go ahead and put this E-clip on. When you do that and push it towards the click button, you want to make sure it's falling into a groove that's in there, and this one we can see is. Now I'm going to take my screwdriver and just gently push that forward, like so. Now we can turn it and take our pick and just put it over the posts. You put it over, just make sure it's all the way in there or all the way down inside the little channel, which we see this one is. And the same thing for the next one. Then of course after we do that, we'll do a little double check just to make sure it's working. And we see we're good. Now you want to leave that in the out position or all the way back so that you don't have any issues when you're putting the spool back in. Now since we've taken off this reel seat, we'll go ahead and put this back on as well. I'm going to add some grease to the bottom part that's going to go inside the reel on these studs right here. And for these screws that are going to go into the reel seat itself, we could add some grease also. This is just a double up on it. It's just to help prevent this from getting frozen into the reel or being difficult to remove. So let's go ahead and add, even though we have some grease on the reel itself, we're going to put some back here as well. Now before we put the reel seat in, we're going to go ahead and put these studs in. I'm going to hand screw them in at first, and then we'll tighten them down with the wrench. And we're going to snug these down. Just a half a crank past snug is good. Now we can take our reel seat, drop that in place like so. And you'll see me go from one side to the other at a diagonal. So I'll go from here to here, then there to there. Then when they're all in, I will snug everything down. Now we'll take this piece right here, drop that back on, and secure with the 2 screws. Last step here will be to go ahead and add some oil to these threads. Stick our brace on and then screw these on. All right, let's go ahead and jump to the spool. Let's go ahead and pull this off. Pull this out. Got a little spring that kind of shot out right there. We have this. We have that washer came off on this side. Now we have that bearing right there. They go together. Now we can pull this clicker off by removing the spring that's around it. I'm going to take my pick, stick it inside one of those little gaps and move it forward. I am actually looking for the end right there. You want to start with the section closest to the end, and this is where it was for me. And just push down and up, and it'll pop out on you like that. Now we can do the same thing for this side. Where is that end? Right there. In and up. I'm covering my finger over it just in case. And some of these, the drag washer does not come out. You can see we had a little bit of corrosion under there, so I'll show you what we'll do with that in a second. Now we can pull the sleeve off, the bearing, then you have your washers here. And I'll show you the washers before we pull them all the way off. Then your washers, however they came off is how you want to try to put those back on, but it can vary, so just keep an eye on it. This one we have 2 washers nesting on each other, facing back towards the clicker area. And then for these other 4, we have them in a flying saucer position. So we have 2 facing one way and the other 2 facing another way, or facing towards the other 2. And basically what that looks like is a little curved section in the middle looking like that. I can't show you with this because they're so small, I won't be able to pick it up on the camera, but just note that that's how these 4 will look you'll have two going one way and two going the other way, and then these two are nesting in each other and facing towards the clicker. Now let's go ahead and pop this out. Here's my other washer. We'll go ahead and pop this out. Now last thing we can do here is go ahead and remove this anti-reverse ratchet by undoing another spring. This one is right here. Just remember, you're down and up, or out and up, excuse me. Now let's kind of work it around and it'll come off. And up that comes, and that's the last piece we have. Now to prep this area, the first thing I'm going to do is apply some rust inhibitor oil on this. And all these things you can find in the video description below if you need to pick up any of these things. I'm just going to use my finger and work that in, but I'll also kind of run it around and make sure it gets into all those nooks and crannies. Now I can take some grease, add it inside right there, also inside there where that bearing sits. And at some point we will go ahead and grease the outside of this as well. But for now I'm just going to grease inside here where that other bearing sits. Now we have around here we can grease, inside right there. Now for the ratchet we're greasing the inside of it, but we're not going to grease on the tines themselves because we don't want to interfere with that anti-reverse action. We can oil these bearings. I'll just kind of work it in. You don't have to grease the shaft, but you certainly can. But you will definitely go ahead and grease right there on those threads. And on the back side here, you can as well. That's where it's going to go inside of the left side. Now one thing to note here is that you can remove this piece. You just kind of press that pin out, then this little piece in the middle comes off. But we'll leave it the way it is. Now I'm going to go ahead and stick my washers back on. I'm going to stick these two on facing the clicker section. Then I'll take these other two and put those on, or other four, excuse me. Now you could grease these if you wanted to. I'm leaving them the way they are. Next we have this little sleeve right here. Put that on. Stick on our bearing, and we'll have it this way, but either way will work. Let's add a little more oil inside here. We don't want too much because we don't want to slow it down, but we do want to protect it as well. And now we can take our sleeve, slip that over it, looking just like that. Now before we go any further, we're going to go ahead and grease this drag washer with some drag grease. You can leave it dry if you like. Adding the grease does add a little bit of longevity to it, but it is one of those things that do last quite a while to begin with anyhow. I'm going to do the back side also, and that's just to have it as a protection since we had some issues going on underneath there. Now since we're using drag grease here, we're going to go ahead and use the same for this side. And it will mix with that oil, so it'll be a little thinner, but we're adding protection and inhibitors. Now the first thing I do is go ahead and add this clicker back on. Drop it in like so. We're going to take our ring, angle it down inside the channel that's in there, one end in, and then we're going to take our finger and push it around to get the rest of it in. You can also use a screwdriver to help you push that down inside there. And there we go. You heard it click in place there. Now we take a drag washer, drop that back in. Take this clip. There's a channel inside here as well. Start it in like so, and then just kind of push down and work it in like we did for the other side. Now you do want to make sure that's in that groove. So once we put it inside, we want to just play with it a little bit to make sure it's seated properly. Now since we're adding rings or retaining rings, we'll go ahead and do this final one as well. This is for the ratchet. We want to make sure that ratchet is on looking just like this. Now this one is similar to a TLD. We're going to take this, open it up around the corners, and have it fall in to that little groove that's in there. There's one, and there's two. And that's seated properly. Now one place we did forget to add a little bit of grease to would be inside right there where that bearing will sit. Now I'm going to take this, drop it through just like that, hold on to it, drop our bearing on, our first bearing on there, take one of our washers on with that, our spring, second washer, and then our other bearing. And we can drop this on over it. And now we're good with this. All right, now for the right side, we're going to go ahead and undo some screws. Right there. We can undo this nut. Pull that up. You see under there we have a washer. This can come up. Let's get that out of the way first. Now before we go ahead and push this out, we're going to go ahead and remove this metal assembly right here. We're going to undo these two screws right here. And you can do it this way or just move everything from off here first. We just happen to do it this way. Drop that off, and now we can push this up. Everything comes out. Let me see what we have here. Pull that sleeve out. Then we have a bearing. We have this bearing on top. Then you have this pinion bearing right here. That should come out. Now you can remove these two things, and I'm going to do it just so I can add some oil or grease inside those holes, because we want to give this reel a full protection, or as full of a protection as we can. Now we can go ahead and take this spring off. You can leave it on if you want to. You don't have to take it off. This also comes off. Notice there's two little tabs in there. They correspond to the two receiving holes right there. We're going to leave that off for now. What I do want to note here is that those tabs will be at the top, like so, instead of like this when you put it back on. So you're gonna have that flat side up like that. All right, now let's hop around a little bit. I'm gonna add some grease inside here where the pinion is gonna go, or pinion bearing is gonna go. A little bit right there, not too much. Some inside right here. Right there where the pinion, or sorry, where that bearing is going to go, and again on top, same sort of deal. Now for these two stoppers, I'm going to add oil instead of grease, and let's go ahead and get those back on. All right, and now we can go ahead and oil these bearings. Grease this. Do inside there if you'd like, not a requirement. We'll definitely grease this. Inside the hole. Rub some on like that. That should suffice. While I'm here, actually, this is a little raised end right there. That raised end is going to be facing down on top of the bearing. Now we can also grease the pinion gear. I like to add a little bit of grease inside of it, and we'll get this main gear. And for the gears, you don't need a lot of grease, but what you will see me do is grease the entire surface area of this after I'm done with the teeth. And this gear only goes on one way, and I'll show you that in a sec. I'm going to grease this entire top side and the bottom side. The reason it only goes on one way is because you have that notched end at the bottom. Now let me go and add some residual grease to this plate that covers the dog. I think we're done with everything we want to grease for now. Now, even though I oiled this pinion bearing, my preference is to grease the outside bearing, so the left side and right side, which will be this pinion bearing, and to oil the spool bearings. So what you'll see me do next is go ahead and add some grease in this as well. And that's because that has the most chance of having water getting inside there. So now I'll just drop this in place. We'll go ahead and get our gear set back up. Remember I said this flat side will be facing up. So I'm sticking it on there, rotating it until it falls in the proper section. Like right there. And I'm gonna... Now with this you want to make sure you pop it all the way to the top, which we just did there. Now before I put that main gear on, I'm going to go ahead and take this piece and put it on looking just like this. We want that notched end, and I'll show you in a second, facing up. There's a little channel right there you want it inside of. That little notch end will be facing up, just like that. Now we can take our drive gear, our main gear, stick that in like so, fit it into the notch that's in that gear, and that's good. Next we have the bearing. Just drop that on, stick our sleeve on, and we'll leave this bearing for afterwards. Now we'll go ahead and take the gear, drop that straight through like so, turn that in this direction so you have that notched end somewhere around there. Now we're going to take that little hole right there, drop it over that raised end, drop it down. We're going to rotate this, push down on that bar, and you want to get it under that wire right there, just like that. Now we'll take this, put that hole over this point right here, drop it in place, and everything is set. All we have to do now is go ahead and cover it up and screw it in. I'm going to add some oil right here and on the other side as well. And all we're going to do now is secure it. And you can always verify that this is working now, and we can see that it is. It's pulling that dog down perfectly. Now let's go ahead and get this out of the way. We're going to stick that inside here, kind of rotate until it falls in place, which we just found right there. This way it's out of the way. I'm going to hold on to this even though we don't really need to. Flip this over, take this bearing, drop it on, push it all the way down. And now we're going to take this, again that little raised end will be facing down towards the bearing, like that. Now take this handle, add some grease right there, it's all around it, under here. We can add some oil to those holes right there if you wanted to. I'm going to drop this over, and then we're going to add that washer that goes there, which is this little piece right here. And then we're going to lock it down with the screw, or with the nut. I'm going to go ahead and put this, I'm going to go ahead and add some residual grease around here. And I'm going to stick this over it, and it doesn't matter if it's lined up properly yet or not, which this one's really close to, because now we're going to either tighten it or loosen it as need be to get those holes lined up, and then we'll screw these 2 screws in to secure it. Now everything else we're going to do is going to be on the outside, so we can put this entire wheel together. Just remember, when you're putting this side on, you want to back that handle up so that a dog is at the top position. You don't want it down here because it can interfere. So I'll take our spool first, drop this in. Make sure I rotate this shaft until it falls into that groove on the back side, like that. And again, we're backing this up to where that dog is in the up position, and then we're just going to stick it on there and then secure it with those 3 screws on the outside. All right, let's go ahead and break this down. We have that piece, a washer under there, and that silver piece in the middle theoretically comes out, but we're going to leave it the way it is. Add some grease inside here, grease on top. We'll grease this. This little plate here is where the tension or preset knob will be clicking over. Those little pins can come out, so you can push those down. There's a spring underneath there. We're gonna leave those in. Add some oil to right there and right there. And then you can add a little bit of grease to that middle right there where the threads are. Now for this piece here, we're gonna make sure that we have the prongs kind of sitting like that at the bottom, because we want to make sure that when we put this over here, it drops in place in the free spool position, which it just did right there. I'm going to hold on to that, drop this washer inside, drop this piece inside. I'm going to rotate it until it falls in place, which it just did right there. And then I'm going to screw this in with that spring inside there. Now we can see that's set. Now the last thing we'll do is this handle knob, and this is one of the things I had to replace on here. We're going to do 2 screws at the top. Now when you replace these handle knobs, it is possible that the washers you receive, or the washers that you see, the existing washers that is, that are on there, will not be enough, so you'll need to get some additional washers on there. You need to take that nut off, so let me get that done. For this, you're going to need a deep socket. Now I'm just going to pull this up. Now I used a different amount of washers than this had initially, and I wanted to make sure I got the spacing right so there was not a lot of play in that handle knob. So you just got to play with it and see how many washers you need to make it work properly for you. So I had 3 at the bottom and none at the top. None at the top. Thought I had 1 at the top, but I don't. Let's check inside here and see. Yep, so just that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and grease this shaft, the threads, and we're going to go ahead and oil these bearings. The larger one is for the top, this smaller one will be for the bottom. We'll take our 3 washers, again yours may be different, drop those on there. Now we'll take our bearing and we're going to pop it in, but you can do it either way. You can push it in there, or you can put it down there and then push this on top of it. We'll do it that way. I'm going to take this bearing, drop it on there. We'll kind of line this up to make sure it falls in place. Just got to be a little careful here, but it has to sit all the way down like that. Now we can take our lock washer, stick that on over it. Then we'll take our nut and we'll get that started over it. And we're going to go ahead and snug this down. Now we can cover this back up and screw this in.